Okay, this is an intermediate session of after the one for beginners we did today about the color settings. And as you can see, the keywords are Photoshop, Creative Cloud, color management, and color profiles. Of course, the accent is on the Adobe family because it's the most widespread way we have to deal with images, be they photographs, and then we are probably looking at Photoshop or illustrations or whatever they are. But in general, what I'm going to say is not connected to any particular working environment because it's a very general kind of issue. And so you can consider this in Photoshop just as an example, really. Let me go very briefly through what I said in the first part, just 3 minutes to recap everything. Well, for anyone who wasn't here, my name is Marco Olivotto. I come from Italy. I studied as a physicist and I work in the field of color correction of static images, basically Photoshop and basically pre-press. I'm a pupil, a student of Dan Margulis, this American guy who actually was the first one to code the old analog techniques of post-production into Photoshop. That he built really a bridge between the analog world and digital. And other than producing images, I'm a teacher, a writer, and a consultant. If you want to see any of my recorded outputs, there are a few, well, actually 40 hours of video courses, unfortunately in Italian only, on the website that is listed, www.teacherinAbox.it. It's online resources. So, in the first session, we discussed what color management is. It is a science, indeed. It has strong scientific foundations. And it is also a workflow that helps you achieve consistent color for what is possible throughout a given production workflow. I say for what it's possible because it is well known that some of the color spaces we have to deal with, like CMYK, have a smaller, narrower gamut than, say, RGB. So some colors cannot be reproduced in certain color spaces. So you can't expect to have a perfect print with traditional technology if you have a very bright, very vivid photograph. But the issue is nevertheless very important because when you have, say, a photograph of a dress that you want to have printed in a magazine, you need to match the color of the dress as close as possible to what is in reality. The problem is that we need to deal with numbers because in digital imaging, all colors are represented by numbers in whatever color space you work. And one of the issues is that if I claim that the rightmost pencil you can see has numbers like 166 in the red, 33 in the green, and 58 in the blue, is this correct? Well, it might be correct, but it really depends on which kind of RGB I am referring to. Because in general, those numbers correspond to different colors in different color spaces. Like on top you see how they would look like in sRGB, which is one of the possible flavors of RGB. The second is Adobe RGB. The third one, which is a lot lighter and almost pink rather than red, is ProPhoto RGB. And the last one, I'm not quite sure you can tell the difference because it's rather dark on the screen, but that's my monitor's RGB, which is a completely different beast yet. So the ones I mentioned, except the one, my monitor, I mean, these are device-independent color spaces like sRGB, Adobe RGB, ProPhoto RGB, and so on. And they are described by what we call ICC, International Color Consortium, color profiles, and they are called working spaces. This is what we said in the first half. And we concluded that the working spaces, that is the independent, device-independent color profiles, are the only profiles you should ever use as a default. Now let me show you which one is the first step towards successful color reproduction. I will show you this in Photoshop and possibly how to sync all the settings in Bridge, because this is what we do in the Adobe suite. But this really holds whether you're working in Illustrator, InDesign, or any other program, even non-Adobe. I'm afraid if you just give me 1 second that I may try to change. Yeah. Okay. Let me see if we can get a better let's see. Okay, now it's better, I think. All right. Okay, so I think you know this well. This is Adobe Photoshop. Let me tell you a story. This is an absolutely true story, and it's about the computer that I'm using right now. I bought this computer last year before going into a fair like this in Italy, and it arrived the day before I was due out to the fair. I didn't even set up my email. I didn't open the browser. I installed what I needed, and that was Photoshop and InDesign, nothing else. So I only had minutes to do it. And the first thing I did was, as I always do, because as a consultant I know that there is a problem, on a completely new computer that had never been turned on, I checked the color settings. The color settings are important enough that Adobe decided to give it a keyboard shortcut. If you take an audience of Photoshop experts, people who are working every day with Photoshop, everybody knows that Command I inverts the image and Command M brings up the curves. But almost nobody knows that Command Shift K brings up this window. And this window, let me cancel for a second, is here. Edit, color settings. I repeat, it's important enough to have a keyboard shortcut, but in my work, I have statistics. 70% of the working computers that I inspect are set like this, because this is Adobe's standard. I won't get into it right now, but I want to show you what happens if you don't change this default. So let me cancel again, and let me go to Bridge, and I've prepared a file. It's a funny picture, all right? Very vivid colors, and as you can see, the preview is correct. We have a decent preview of the photograph. I mean, we can believe the colors. We will never know if the background was red. We will never know if the feathers are actually pink, but at least we may believe the skin tone. So it's not completely unbelievable. Now let me try to open this in Photoshop, which means that I have to double click on this icon, and I would like to point your attention to what happens. There is a warning. And for a second, we should pretend that we know absolutely nothing about color management and color profiles. It is not a wrong starting point, because believe me, most people, photographers especially, know very little or nothing about these issues. So we should try to be reading what's written here, and try to understand from the point of view of someone who has never heard of these things. So, bear with me. It says that the document, whatever it is that I'm opening, has an embedded color profile that does not match the current RGB working space. I think it's clear to everyone, yeah? Yeah, all right. And it's kind enough to tell me that the embedded color profile is called sRGB whatever, and that the working space is monitor RGB display. Okay, fair enough. And then I have 3 chances, and only the last one is selected, with no hint that there should be another one. Now put yourself in the position of someone who ignores about color management. And this is the first time that the program was launched, so this is what Adobe suggests. All right? And I have 3 options. Use the embedded profile instead of the working space, or convert the document's color to the working space, or simply discard the embedded profile, that is, avoid color management. I think that from a psychological point of view, if we don't know about something, we don't want to deal with it. Simply, we kill what we fear, and we fear what we don't understand, and we don't understand what we don't know, so we kill what we don't know. Moreover, there is a giant like Adobe that suggests this is the right thing to do, and so I will very happily go enter and ignore the profile, and this is what I get. Do you remember how the picture originally was? So, something must be horribly wrong. Let me try again. Same picture. What if I did this? Oh. So haven't we got something wrong in the settings, I think? Now, let me tell you, I was accused of being a psychological terrorist because they say no, because you opened a raster file, and no one actually works with raster files. Photographers use raw files. Okay, you have a point here. I would like to... sorry. I need to open a certain file that is here. It would be interesting if... Okay, it won't open my folder. What am I going to do? Let's try again. Let's go here, and here, and here. This is what I want to do. This is a raw file, so something that a photographer would like to open. And like many good photographers, we think that ProPhoto RGB, that has a huge gamut, is a good working space. And so we open the image, but unfortunately we get the same warning. Discard the embedded profile. And this is what we get. So even the raw workflow isn't immune at all from this problem. Now, let me tell you what happens. The problem lies, of course, in the color settings. Problem number one, there is a choice of working spaces, okay? Monitor RGB display is supposed to be the working space that sort of rules Photoshop. This is the worst choice you can ever make for the reasons I explained in the first part of this workshop. One of the problems is that your monitor display, your profile has nothing to do with me. So if you give me a file like this, I can honor, as we say, your profile, I can use it, but the numbers are referred to a device that I will never see, probably because now this is very common, we are working maybe overseas. So what am I going to do with your monitor? Sorry. Second, it may not be that strange for you to see now US web-coated SWAP V2 here, but the true problem is that we have the same setting in Europe. I switched to the English version of Photoshop for this workshop, but I use the Italian version, and our printing conditions do not respect SWAP. We are under FOGRA 39, say, for coated stock and other similar ISO rules. So if you're working in CMYK, even in the Italian or French or German version of the program, this setting is wrong because you're actually producing separations that would print hopefully well under these conditions, which is web printing in the United States area, where the inks are different, where the conditions are different. So sending this kind of separation to a commercial printer in Europe is a recipe for disaster. Well, it's not that different, but it is different, and we are aiming, of course, to quality and accuracy of color. All right? I won't get into the gray and spot settings because they are less important. But let me tell you, all I've said so far sort of disappears because the really horribly wrong setting is here. That is the color management policies. Color management is supposed to make color constant. If you turn it off, you simply ignore the profiles. You see? So basically, what you have to do is change this setting in a way that the profiles embedded with the file are maintained, are honored, as we say. My suggestion is, if you're into press, if you're into printing, this, in Europe at least, is a good choice. Europe Prepress 3. You see, we have bonuses, like the RGB working space is a very reasonable Adobe RGB, which is what is suggested for anyone working in the press industry. Somebody says that sRGB is correct as well, and it might as well be, but surely both are better than the monitor. Moreover, in Europe at least, we have coated foreground 39 and the 12647, whatever it is, ISO norm to rely on, not swap anymore. So we are closer to any possible, any reasonable standard that we may have in Europe. Again, gray and spot I don't care about, but the policies are important, like preserve embedded profiles, preserve embedded profiles, preserve embedded profiles. And when there is a mismatch, please, Photoshop, be kind to me. Ask when opening, ask when copying and pasting from one document to the other. And whenever a profile is missing, ask what am I supposed to do? Because this is the only way to go. Now, if I close this and try to open it again, I'll start from the last image. This is what we expect. We still get a warning, but notice that the default has changed. So now the choice is correct and the color is maintained. Moreover, if I work on the horrible image that I had first, like this, okay, again the choice is correct. Use the embedded profile, and this is what happens. I would like to point your attention to the term that is used, honor the profile. You can really feel something religious in the word. I'm not joking, like stop in front of a profile. Because a color profile, especially for an RGB file, is one of the most important things that it will ever have with itself. It's the dictionary that allows us to read the correct numbers and say, okay, this pencil is this red and not that red. Now, color management is a bit more complex because there are several profiles and you have to convert from one to the other. So please, bear with me. We go back again to the infamous window and see, let me discuss a bit the second choice. The second choice is that the document's colors should be converted to the working space. What is the working space? It's not the monitor anymore, it's Adobe RGB. Now let me tell you the pros and cons of this. If you do this, you will have a common profile in all your files. So this is a good idea. But in general, and I mean in general, it is possible that you are converting from a wider gamut profile to a smaller one. That is, you may have an image whose colors, the palette of colors is very extended, and you're trying to squeeze them into a smaller space. And this makes you lose colors. So, my suggestion is, don't do this unless you know exactly what you're doing. And I will add that when you need to do it, you will be expert enough to know what you're doing, so there is no problem. But your first choice should be like this. The third choice we already discussed. It is useful in some cases, but in my opinion, it should be hidden, not be here. It should be in a very remote window where the non-expert operator of Photoshop can go, you know. It's something that is very dangerous in this position, so never discard a profile. Which gives you something to think about. If I wanted to save this image now, I must make sure that in the save window, this mark is on, because I need to embed the color profile, whatever it is, in the file. You can imagine the file has the image data and also has the metadata, like when the picture was taken, which size it is, which kind of camera, was the flash on, I don't care, but I care about the profile. I care about the dictionary, you know. Like, I come from Italy, I'm in Germany, If I can only speak Italian, I'd better have a dictionary with me, otherwise I'll starve. That's the problem. If I lose my dictionary and I keep on speaking Italian and no one knows which language I am using, how can you understand me? That's a problem. And that's exactly what happens between the devices. If a device is supposed to accept CMYK or whatever, and you feed it RGB, it's better if someone makes a translation. This is what happens. Any printer works like this, if you want it to work like this. But the translation can only happen if a dictionary is embedded with the file. Otherwise, your color can be ruined completely. This is it. So remember to embed the profile. I'll also give you a survival rule. Now, the web. The web is everywhere. We have hundreds of thousands, millions of images on the web. And most of them are without a profile. So when you download an image from the web, it may have a profile or not. I'll give you some advice. If it doesn't, what happens is this. When you try with these settings to open an image without a color profile, you get a warning which is slightly different, like the document has no embedded profile. What are you going to do at this point? You have to guess, simply. Leave as is, don't color manage, is not a good idea. Assign work in RGB, could be, I don't know, but usually you choose one. And if it comes from the web, remember, it's very, very likely that it is sRGB, because that's the standard profile on the web. It gets stripped and discarded because they want to upload on the web lighter files. An sRGB profile is 4 kilobytes, so it's not that big. But some people have the economy in mind, and so they strip the profile. So you have to guess. And you have to guess and say, okay, assign profile sRGB. Not correct in this case, I'm sorry. Okay, but in principle, it might be. If you guess the right profile, but it's like a Russian roulette, something wrong might happen in the end. If you guess the right profile, then the preview, what you see in your image is indeed correct. All right? So, at this point, where are we? Here, I think. A short recap. The first is that you should never use a device-dependent color profile in Photoshop color settings. The second is that you must make sure that the color management policies are set indeed correctly. And this means most of the time, 99% of the time, honor the embedded profile. Third, please avoid automatic conversions unless you know exactly what you're doing. 4, always save your files with an attached profile. And 5, keep all your Creative Cloud apps in sync. Let me show you what I mean. You probably know Bridge as a browser, as a program that helps you organize images. You can't edit images in Bridge. You can't really do much to the images, but it is a very powerful program to catalog them and manage them. It has also another feature which is called, I'm sorry, this is the Italian version, impostazioni colore, which means color settings. When you hit this, you simply find a number of presets, and this Prestampa Europa 3 is pre-press Europe 3 that we saw in Photoshop. It's exactly the same. So you just choose one and go apply. Apparently, nothing happens, but what really happens is that the same color settings is now common to Photoshop, Illustrator, InDesign, whatever in the Creative Cloud has color settings. And so you have a common, regular and smooth workflow, and you make sure that when you bring an image from one program to the other, they will behave the same. This is very important. Just remember one thing, you cannot make color settings in Bridge. What you usually do is If you need to make a certain setup, let's say you want this, but you want to use sRGB, this is a custom set that you will have to save somehow. You give it a name, and then it can be seen by Bridge, and then you can propagate your own settings throughout the Creative Cloud programs. So don't try to build a setting in Bridge, because it simply can't. You have to do it in Photoshop and then go to Bridge and blah blah. So this is more or less everything about it. And number 6, please insist that other people follow the same policies that you do. Otherwise, your work is worth nothing. I think you're all very aware on how the electrical system of an apartment works. You have switches for the light. You enter your house, switch on the light in the corridor, and this is what goes on. Color management is slightly different. There are many switches, but they won't turn on the light. The light will come on if all the switches are in the right positions. Only I am operating one, and he is operating the second, and this lady is operating the third. So if we are doing the right thing altogether, the light comes on. Otherwise, even one mistake and the light won't come on. It's completely useless that you follow a color managed workflow if the next person in line in the production chain doesn't. So be very adamant that other people should follow the same policies, all right? And this is about it. So, just to let you know that tomorrow we will change subject. There will be a short session, intermediate level, on LAB color and its power, not connected to color management. It's more image manipulation and color correction and color reading maybe. And it will be here tomorrow at 4:30 p.m. And if you want to know more, this is my English blog. There's an Italian one, but this is the English one. And it's Moon Photoshop. M-O is me on Photoshop. It's a pun, of course. .com. It's completely free blog. Not so many resources because it was started about a month ago. The Italian one is richer if you can read Italian, and it's marcoolivotto.com. And if you have any questions before I leave, anything was clear enough. This is just a recommendation. Do it like this, or you'll be in serious trouble sooner or later. All right? Anyone?